The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Willow Creek's dusty Main Street as Virginia Graham stood frozen on the porch of Mrs. Hollister's general store, her fingers crumpling the edges of the invitation she'd been handed moments before. The women's hushed whispers stung more than the spring dust devils that whipped through town. "I'm sorry, Virginia, but the mother's circle has certain requirements," Mrs. Hollister said, her thin lips pursed with performative regret. "Perhaps next year, dear." Virginia nodded mutely, tucking the rejected invitation into her apron pocket. At 26, she'd learned to school her features into a mask of indifference when the townsfolk reminded her of her place, or rather, her lack of one. She smoothed down her simple blue calico dress and adjusted her bonnet, determined not to let them see how deeply their rejection cut. "I need 2 pounds of sugar and some coffee, please," she said, voice steady despite the lump in her throat. The year was 1875, and Willow Creek, Colorado, was growing from a mining camp into a proper town. Virginia had arrived 3 years ago to take over the schoolhouse after the previous teacher had married and moved east. She'd poured her heart into the school, teaching not just reading and mathematics, but also tending to cuts, tears, and broken hearts. The children adored her, but their mothers kept a careful distance. Virginia paid for her goods and stepped back into the late afternoon sunlight, blinking away the stubborn moisture in her eyes. She would not cry over this slight. Not again. "Miss Graham, you heading back to the schoolhouse?" Virginia turned to find Caleb Landry walking toward her, his steady gait and broad shoulders unmistakable even from a distance. The town's most eligible bachelor, Caleb ran the largest cattle operation in the county. At 32, he had the weathered good looks that came from years in the saddle, with sun-streaked brown hair and eyes the color of aged whiskey. "Mr. Landry," she acknowledged with a small nod. "Yes, I've some lessons to prepare for tomorrow." Caleb fell into step beside her, taking the heavy packages from her arms despite her protests. "Saw you coming out of Hollister's looking like you'd lost your best friend." Virginia's steps faltered. "It's nothing of consequence." "Doesn't look like nothing," he countered gently. They walked in silence for several moments, the dirt road crunching beneath their boots. Virginia stole a glance at the man beside her. Though they'd spoken often enough, Caleb's niece and nephew attended her school, they'd never been particularly close. "The mother's circle is meeting tonight," she finally said. "Mrs. Hollister made it clear I wasn't welcome." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's a damn shame, pardon my language, madam. Those women wouldn't know true character if it danced in front of them wearing bells." His unexpected defense loosened something in Virginia's chest. "It shouldn't matter. I have my students, my books. I don't need their approval." "No, you don't," Caleb agreed. "But it still stings, doesn't it?" Virginia didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. They reached the small schoolhouse that doubled as Virginia's living quarters. The white clapboard building sat on a slight hill overlooking the town, isolated but with a view of everything, like Virginia herself. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Landry," she said, reaching for her packages. Caleb held onto them a moment longer. "You know, Miss Graham, you might not be part of their circle, but you're still the heart of this town. Those children adore you, their fathers respect you, and some of us." He paused, a hint of color touching his tan cheeks. "Some of us see a lot more than most folks realize." Before Virginia could respond, he tipped his hat and handed over her packages. "Good evening, Miss Graham. Don't let them dim your light." She watched him stride away, his words echoing in her mind, the heart of this town. No one had ever described her that way before. Inside her modest quarters, Virginia lit the oil lamp and unpacked her purchases, her movements mechanical as her mind replayed Caleb's words. The rejection still stung, but somehow it felt less important now. She moved to her small desk, running her fingers over the stack of student essays waiting to be graded. Perhaps there were different ways to mother than bearing children of one's own. The morning dawned bright and clear, with spring sunlight streaming through the schoolhouse windows as Virginia wrote the day's lessons on the blackboard. The sound of horses' hooves outside drew her attention, and she was surprised to see Caleb Landry dismounting, helping his niece and nephew down from their own ponies. "Miss Graham," he called, ushering the children toward the schoolhouse. "Hope you don't mind us arriving early." 8-year-old Emma Landry rushed inside, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Miss Graham, Uncle Caleb said we could bring you these." Virginia accepted the gift, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a half-dozen perfectly ripe strawberries, the season's first. "Mr. Landry, this is too generous," she said, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Nonsense. Emma and Thomas helped pick them from our garden patch yesterday." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Thought they might brighten your day." Before Virginia could thank him properly, more students began arriving. Caleb tipped his hat and departed, leaving Virginia to wonder at this new attention from a man who had previously been nothing more than a polite acquaintance. The day passed in a blur of arithmetic and history lessons. As Virginia dismissed the children for the afternoon, she noticed Emma lingering behind. "Miss Graham." The little girl twisted her fingers in her pinafore. "Are you coming to the spring festival on Saturday?" Virginia hesitated. Town gatherings were always difficult. She was included out of propriety, but always felt the invisible wall between herself and the other women. "I'm not certain, Emma. Uncle Caleb says you should come. He says you make the best apple pie in the county and it wouldn't be right without it." Emma beamed. "And he's building the dance floor himself." Virginia felt a flush creep up her neck. "Is that so? Well, I suppose I could bring a pie." Emma clapped her hands together. "Uncle Caleb will be happy. He says you work too hard and need some fun." Thomas Landry, a serious 10-year-old, appeared in the doorway. "Emma, Uncle Caleb's waiting. Come on." As the children scampered off, Virginia found herself smiling. Caleb Landry was talking about her. The thought sent an unexpected flutter through her chest, one she quickly tamped down. Men like Caleb Landry didn't court spinster school teachers. He was being kind. Nothing more. Still, as she swept the classroom floor and arranged books for tomorrow's lessons, Virginia couldn't help but wonder what it might be like to be the object of Caleb Landry's genuine interest. Saturday arrived with perfect weather for the spring festival. Virginia spent the morning baking not one but 2 apple pies, taking extra care with the lattice crusts. She dressed in her second-best dress, a pale green cotton with delicate white piping, and pinned her dark auburn hair in a softer style than her usual severe bun. The town square was transformed with bright bunting and tables laden with food. Children ran about playing tag while men worked to finish the promised dance floor. Virginia spotted Caleb immediately, hammering boards into place, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. She made her way to the food tables, where Mrs. Hollister and the other women of the Mother's Circle were arranging dishes. "Virginia, dear, how lovely you could join us," Mrs. Hollister said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You can put those over with the other desserts." As Virginia arranged her pies, she heard the whispers. "Take such pains with her appearance, but I suppose when one hasn't the blessing of children to occupy one's time. Shame about her condition, of course, but perhaps it's God's will." Virginia's hands stilled. Her condition, her inability to have children, was a private grief, not town gossip. A doctor in Denver had confirmed it years ago after a childhood illness, crushing her dreams of a family of her own. How the women had discovered this, she couldn't imagine, but their casual cruelty made the bright day suddenly cold. "Ladies, those pies look mighty fine." A deep voice cut through the chatter. Caleb stood behind Virginia, his presence solid and reassuring. "Miss Graham, I believe you promised my niece and nephew a game of horseshoes. They're looking for you." Grateful for the rescue, Virginia allowed Caleb to guide her away from the women. "You heard them, didn't you?" she asked quietly once they were out of earshot. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Yes." "And they ought to be ashamed, talking about matters that aren't their business." "It's true, though," Virginia admitted, surprising herself with her candor. I can't have children, never could. Caleb stopped walking, turning to face her. And that somehow makes you less worthy of respect. Less of a woman, he shook his head. That's pure foolishness. His indignation on her behalf sparked something warm in Virginia's chest. Most men want sons to carry on their name, their legacy. Most men don't think beyond what they've been told to want, Caleb countered. A legacy isn't just blood, Virginia. It's what you leave in people's hearts. The use of her first name, spoken with such gentle conviction, made her breath catch. Like those children over there, he continued, nodding toward the schoolyard where her students played. You've shaped them more than some of their own mothers have. That's a powerful legacy. Virginia blinked back sudden tears. Mr. Landry, Caleb, please, we've known each other too long for such formality. Caleb, she repeated, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. Thank you. He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his already handsome face. No need for thanks, just truth. The moment stretched between them, something unspoken passing in the warm spring air. Then Emma's voice called out, breaking the spell, Uncle Caleb, Miss Graham, you promised horseshoes. Caleb offered his arm. Shall we? Virginia placed her hand on his sleeve, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric. We shall. The afternoon passed pleasantly as Virginia joined in games with her students, conscious of Caleb's gaze following her. As evening approached, lanterns were lit, and the fiddlers took their places for dancing. Virginia stood to the side, watching couples form on the newly constructed dance floor. She didn't expect to participate. Schoolteachers were not typical dance partners, but found herself content to observe the community's joy. May I have this dance, Miss Graham? Caleb stood before her, hand extended, eyes warm in the lantern light. I am not much of a dancer, Virginia admitted. Neither am I, Caleb replied with a wink. We can be clumsy together. Virginia placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the floor. His hand at her waist was respectful but firm, his palm warm against hers as they joined the other couples in a lively reel. Everyone's watching, she murmured, noticing the stares. Let them, Caleb said simply. Maybe they'll learn something. They danced 2 more sets before Virginia begged a rest, her cheeks flushed with exertion and pleasure. Caleb fetched them both cups of punch and led her to a quiet bench beneath an old oak tree. I don't think I've ever seen you smile so much, he observed, settling beside her. Virginia sipped her punch. I don't believe I've had cause to, at least not in public. That's a shame. You have a beautiful smile. The compliment, offered so casually, made Virginia's heart skip. Mr. Landry, Caleb, why are you being so kind to me? Caleb considered her question, his expression thoughtful. I've watched you for 3 years, Virginia. Watched how you care for every child in this town like they're your own. How you stay late helping the miners' children learn to read. How you've nursed sick students and mended torn clothes and never asked for praise. He set down his cup, turning to face her more fully. A man notices things like that, especially a man who's been looking for something real in a world full of false pleasantries. Virginia could hardly breathe. Are you courting me, Mr. Landry? I'm trying to, he admitted with a soft laugh. Though I'm making a poor job of it if you have to ask. A burst of laughter from across the square drew their attention. Several members of the mother's circle were watching them, whispering behind their hands. Virginia's happiness dimmed. They'll never accept me, you know. And association with me will only damage your standing in town. Let me worry about that, Caleb said firmly. Besides, I've lived in Willow Creek all my life. These people know me, they respect me, and eventually they'll respect us. Us. The word hung in the air between them, full of promise. May I call on you properly tomorrow? Caleb asked. Perhaps take you for a ride to see the spring wildflowers in the North Meadow, Virginia smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes. I'd like that very much. As promised, Caleb arrived at the schoolhouse the next afternoon, driving a smart buggy pulled by 2 matching bay horses. Virginia had changed into a simple riding dress after Sunday services, her heart fluttering with anticipation. The North Meadow was a riot of color bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, and golden poppies swaying in the gentle breeze. Caleb spread a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree and unpacked a picnic lunch. "This is beautiful," Virginia said, breathing in the fragrant air. "I've never ventured this far from town." "The ranch extends another 3 miles that way," Caleb pointed north. "My father claimed this land when I was just a boy, built it up from nothing. You must be very proud of what you've accomplished," Caleb nodded, a distant look in his eyes. "I am. Though it gets lonely sometimes, rattling around in that big house by myself. Emma and Thomas stay with me when my sister visits her husband's family in Denver, but most days it's just me and the ranch hands." Virginia's heart ached for him. "I understand loneliness all too well." "I know you do." Caleb's eyes met hers, his gaze intent. "That's part of what drew me to you, I think. You understand what it means to build a life on your own terms, even when it's not the one others expect for you." He reached for her hand, his calloused thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Virginia, I need you to know something. I've heard the talk about your condition, that you can't have children, and I want you to know that it doesn't matter to me." Virginia's breath caught. "Caleb, most men want heirs, I want a partner," he interrupted gently. "Someone to share my days and nights with, someone who understands that family isn't just about blood." He squeezed her hand. "I have the ranch, Emma and Thomas who already adore you, and a town full of children who look up to you. That's more family than most people ever have." Tears welled in Virginia's eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not for what she lacked, but for all that she was. "You truly mean that, don't you?" she whispered. "Every word." Caleb shifted closer. "Virginia, I'm not asking for any declarations today. I just want the chance to court you properly, to show you what life could be like if we faced it together." Virginia looked at their joined hands, then up at the honest face of the man beside her. "I'd like that very much, Caleb." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Virginia's life. Caleb called on her regularly, bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, fresh flowers from his garden, once even a kitten from a litter born in his barn. They rode together on Sunday afternoons, exploring the beautiful countryside around Willow Creek. Sometimes Emma and Thomas joined them for picnics by the river, the four of them laughing and playing like a real family. The town noticed, of course. Virginia caught the whispers, saw the disapproving glances from the mother's circle, but found she cared less with each passing day. Caleb's unwavering support and growing affection were a shield against their judgment. On a warm evening in late May, Caleb invited Virginia to dinner at his ranch house. "I want you to see my home," he explained, "to know what your life might be like should you choose to share it with me." The Landry ranch house was larger than Virginia had imagined, a 2-story structure of solid timber with wide porches and large windows. Inside, it was simply but comfortably furnished, clearly a bachelor's domain but with touches that spoke of Caleb's care. "It needs a woman's touch," Caleb admitted as he showed her through the parlor. "My mother had plans for this place, but she passed before she could see them through." "It's wonderful," Virginia assured him, running her hand along a polished banister, "so full of possibility." Caleb's housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, had prepared a delicious dinner which they ate by candlelight. Afterward, Caleb led Virginia onto the back porch, where they could see the stars spreading like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "Virginia," Caleb said softly, taking her hand. "These past weeks have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she admitted, her heart racing at the intensity in his eyes. "I know it might seem fast to some, but when you get to be my age, you learn not to waste time when something feels right." He took a deep breath. "Virginia Graham, I've fallen in love with you. Your kindness, your strength, your beautiful heart, and I was hoping, that is, I wanted to ask." He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Virginia's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a single perfect diamond. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Virginia's eyes as joy bloomed in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. Yes, Caleb, yes. Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke of promises kept and dreams fulfilled. Virginia melted into his embrace, feeling for the first time that she had truly found her home. News of their engagement spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Many townspeople offered sincere congratulations. Virginia's students were particularly delighted, but the mother's circle remained coolly civil, their disapproval thinly veiled behind polite smiles. Just ignore them, Caleb advised when Virginia mentioned their reaction. They'll come around eventually. But the women's hostility became more overt as the wedding approached. Virginia was excluded from planning meetings for the town's Independence Day celebration, despite having organized the school children's recitation every year previously. Invitations to tea dried up for the few women who had maintained friendly relations with her. The situation came to a head one afternoon in early June. Virginia was at the general store, selecting fabric for her wedding dress with Emma's enthusiastic assistance, when she overheard Mrs. Hollister speaking to several other women. "It's simply inappropriate, Mrs. Hollister declared, her voice carrying clearly through the store. Caleb Landry could have his pick of any girl in the county girls who could give him proper airs. Instead, he chooses that barren schoolteacher. What kind of future is that for the Landry name?" Virginia froze, the bolt of cream-colored silk clutched in her hands. Emma looked up at her in confusion, too young to understand the cruelty in the words. "And to think," another voice chimed in, "she'll be mistress of the largest ranch in the county when she can't even fulfill a wife's most basic duty." Hot tears pricked at Virginia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Setting down the fabric, she took Emma's hand. "I think we're finished here for today, Emma. Let's go find your uncle." As they turned to leave, they found Caleb standing in the doorway, his expression thunderous. He had clearly heard every word. "Ladies," he said, his voice deceptively calm, "I believe you're discussing my fiancé." The store fell silent, all eyes turning to the tall rancher. "Caleb," Mrs. Hollister began, her face flushing. "We were just concerned, let me be clear," Caleb interrupted, walking to Virginia's side and taking her hand. "Virginia Graham is the woman I love and the woman I have chosen to make my wife. Her worth isn't measured by her ability to bear children, but by the love in her heart and the impact she has on this community." He looked around the store, meeting each woman's eyes directly. "She may not be part of your mother's circle, but she's been more of a mother to half the children in this town than some who claim the title. She's taught them, nursed them, encouraged them, and loved them without condition." Virginia squeezed his hand, overwhelmed by his defense. "You're right about one thing," Caleb continued. "Virginia will be mistress of the Landry Ranch, and she'll bring to it the same kindness, intelligence, and grace that she's brought to this town for 3 years. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to call themselves her friend, Mrs. Hollister's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Well, you never have looked beyond your own narrow view of what makes a woman valuable," Caleb finished for her, "and that's a tragedy for you, not for Virginia." With that, he turned to Virginia. "I believe we have wedding plans to discuss, my love." He offered his arm, which she took with trembling fingers, and led her and Emma out of the stunned silence of the store. Once outside, Virginia's composure cracked. "Caleb, I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause such discord. You have nothing to apologize for," Caleb said firmly. "Those women should be ashamed, not you." He cupped her cheek gently. "Are you all right?" Virginia nodded, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I am now." Emma tugged at Virginia's skirt. "Miss Graham, are you still going to be my aunt?" Virginia knelt down to the child's level, her heart melting at the worry in those innocent eyes. "Yes, sweet girl, nothing those ladies said changes that." Emma's face brightened. "Good. Because Uncle Caleb says you're going to teach me to make apple pie, and Thomas says you're going to help us with our schoolwork at home, and we're going to be a real family." Virginia glanced up at Caleb, who was watching them with tender eyes. "Yes, Emma, A real family. The weeks leading up to their wedding were a whirlwind of preparation. Virginia continued teaching while simultaneously preparing to move into the ranch house. The school board had agreed to let her finish the term, but she would be stepping down as schoolteacher after the wedding not because Caleb demanded it, but because she wanted to devote herself to her new role as his wife and mistress of the Landry Ranch. The confrontation at the general store had unexpected consequences. Several townspeople, disgusted by the mother's circle's behavior, rallied around Virginia. The blacksmith's wife brought her a handmade quilt for her new home. The doctor's daughter offered to help with wedding preparations. Even the mayor's wife made a point of publicly congratulating Virginia after Sunday services. Most surprising was a hesitant visit from young Mrs. Peterson, the newest member of the mother's circle. "Miss Graham," she said, standing nervously on the schoolhouse steps after classes one day. "I wanted to apologize for not speaking up that day in the store. What they said was cruel." Virginia invited her in for tea, touched by the young woman's courage. "It's difficult to stand against them," Mrs. Peterson confessed. "But the truth is, I admire you. My Thomas adores you as his teacher. He came home last week and announced he wants to be a doctor because of the book you let him borrow about human anatomy." Virginia smiled, remembering the boy's enthusiasm. "He has a keen mind. He'd make a fine doctor. You see, that's just it. You see the potential in our children, not just what society expects them to be." Mrs. Peterson hesitated. "I was wondering, would you mind terribly if I came to your wedding? My husband thinks very highly of Mr. Landry and we'd like to show our support." By the day of the wedding, a perfect Saturday in late June, the town of Willow Creek had divided into two camps: those who supported Virginia and Caleb, and the dwindling circle of women who clung to their judgment. To Virginia's surprise and delight, the supporters far outnumbered the detractors. The ceremony was held in the small church on the edge of town, decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Virginia wore a simple but elegant dress of cream silk, carrying a bouquet of roses from Caleb's garden. Emma served as her flower girl, beaming with pride in her new role as niece. As Virginia walked down the aisle toward Caleb, she felt none of the loneliness that had defined so much of her life. Instead, she saw the faces of her students, the parents who had come to respect her, the townspeople who had chosen kindness over judgment. And at the end of the aisle stood Caleb, his eyes shining with love and promise. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "So do you," she whispered back, making him grin. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising love, respect, and partnership through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The celebration afterward, held at the Landry Ranch, was the happiest gathering Virginia had ever attended. Tables groaned with food contributed by well-wishers. Children played games on the sprawling lawn, even Mrs. Peterson and several other younger mothers approached Virginia with congratulations and tentative overtures of friendship. As evening fell and lanterns were lit around the property, Caleb pulled Virginia aside to a quiet corner of the porch. "Happy, Mrs. Landry?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Incredibly so," she replied, leaning into his solid warmth. "Though it still doesn't seem quite real." "Oh, it's real," Caleb assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple, "and it's just the beginning." Virginia looked out at the celebration at Emma and Thomas playing with their friends, at the mixture of townspeople and ranch hands enjoying the festivities, at the home that was now hers. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I spent so many years feeling like I wasn't enough because I couldn't be a mother. But looking at all of this, at the community we're building, I realize there are so many ways to nurture, to care, to leave a legacy." Caleb turned her to face him, his expression serious. "You, Virginia Landry, are more than enough. You always have been." He kissed her then, a promise sealed under the stars as music and laughter drifted around them. The first months of marriage were a joyful adjustment for Virginia. She settled into the rhythm of ranch life, learning from Mrs. Winters how to manage the large household while putting her own touches on the home. Caleb was a considerate, loving husband who valued her opinions and included her in decisions about the ranch. Emma and Thomas visited often, especially during the summer months when school was not in session. Virginia discovered a natural talent for ranch management, keeping meticulous books and suggesting improvements that impressed even Caleb's most experienced hands. By fall, Virginia had established herself as a respected mistress of the Landry Ranch. She hosted dinners for neighboring ranchers and their wives, organized a harvest festival for the ranch hands and their families, and even started a small lending library in one corner of the parlor, sharing her beloved books with anyone interested in reading. One crisp October morning, Virginia was in the kitchen garden harvesting the last of the season's vegetables when she heard a wagon approaching. To her surprise, she saw Mrs. Hollister climb down, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Hollister," Virginia greeted her, wiping her hands on her apron. "This is unexpected." "Mrs. Landry," the older woman replied stiffly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Would you care for some tea?" Inside the warm kitchen, Virginia prepared tea while Mrs. Hollister perched awkwardly on a chair, her gaze taking in the homey space with its copper pots and bundles of drying herbs. "You've made quite a home here," she finally said. "Thank you. It brings me great joy." Mrs. Hollister fidgeted with her gloves. "Mrs. Landry, Virginia, I've come to ask a favor, though I'm not sure I deserve it." Virginia set the tea service on the table. "What kind of favor?" "The school board is having difficulty finding a replacement for you." Mrs. Hollister sighed. "The new teacher left after just a month. Said the children were unmanageable. Now we have 20 children with no instructor, and parents are becoming desperate." Virginia had heard rumors of trouble at the school but hadn't wanted to interfere. "That's unfortunate. That is, the Mother's Circle were wondering if you might consider teaching again, just until we can find a suitable permanent replacement." Mrs. Hollister looked down at her tea. "I understand if you refuse, given how some of us treated you." Virginia was silent for a long moment. "This must be difficult for you to ask." "It is," the older woman admitted. "But seeing how you've thrived here, how the community has embraced you despite our concerns, well, it's made me reconsider many things." Virginia thought of her students, of the empty schoolhouse. "I would need to discuss it with my husband." "Of course." When Caleb returned from checking the cattle that evening, Virginia explained Mrs. Hollister's request. "You miss teaching, don't you?" he asked, watching her face closely. Virginia nodded. "I do, but my place is here now with you." "Your place is wherever you can do the most good," Caleb corrected gently. "And there's no reason you can't do both. The school is only a short ride away. You could teach during the day and still be home for dinner." Virginia's heart swelled with love for this man who continually supported her dreams. "Are you certain, Virginia? I didn't marry you to keep you confined to this house. I married you because I admire your spirit, your intelligence, your caring heart." He smiled. "If teaching again would make you happy, then that's what you should do." And so, 3 days later, Virginia returned to the schoolhouse. The children greeted her with such enthusiasm that she found herself blinking back tears. Even some of the mothers who had once shunned her now nodded respectfully as they dropped off their children. Life fell into a new rhythm. Virginia taught during weekdays, riding to and from the ranch on a gentle mare Caleb had trained specifically for her. In the evenings and on weekends, she embraced her role as Mrs. Landry, hosting dinners, managing household affairs, and spending precious time with her husband. As winter approached, Virginia received a surprising invitation to the Mother's Circle annual Christmas planning meeting. "Are you going to accept?" Caleb asked as they sat before the fire in their cozy parlor. Virginia considered the question. "I think I will. Not because I need their approval anymore, but because it's an opportunity to build bridges, to show that there are many ways to contribute to a community." The meeting was initially awkward, with several women clearly uncomfortable with Virginia's presence. But as they discussed plans for the town's Christmas celebration, Virginia's practical suggestions and willingness to take on responsibilities gradually eased the tension. Mrs. Peterson, who had become a genuine friend, suggested that Virginia coordinate the children's Christmas pageant. "No one knows the children better than Mrs. Landry," she pointed out. "And last year's performance under her direction was the best we've ever had." To Virginia's surprise, Mrs. Hollister nodded in agreement. "An excellent suggestion. Mrs. Landry, would you be willing?" "I would be honored," Virginia replied, feeling a small but significant shift in the group's dynamics. That Christmas season was the happiest Virginia had ever known. The children's pageant was a resounding success, with every child in town participating in some capacity. Virginia and Caleb hosted a Christmas Eve dinner for Emma, Thomas, and Caleb's sister's family, filling the ranch house with laughter and love. As they lay in bed that night, Virginia nestled against Caleb's strong chest. She reflected on how completely her life had transformed in a single year. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb murmured, stroking her hair. "How blessed I am," she replied softly. "A year ago I was alone, excluded, convinced I would never have a family because I couldn't bear children." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "And now," Virginia smiled in the darkness, "now I have you, Emma and Thomas. A community that's beginning to accept me for who I am rather than what I lack. Students who fill my days with purpose." She traced his jawline with gentle fingers. "I have more family than I ever dreamed possible, and it's only the beginning," Caleb promised, kissing her tenderly. Spring brought new beginnings to the Landry Ranch. The cattle herd thrived under Caleb's expert management, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Virginia planted an expanded kitchen garden with Mrs. Winter's guidance. It was also the season of new life: calves in the pastures, chicks in the henhouse, and a surprising development within the Landry household itself. Virginia had been feeling unwell for several weeks, tired, dizzy at times, with certain foods suddenly unappetizing. Initially, she attributed it to the busy schedule of teaching and running the household, but when she fainted while teaching arithmetic one afternoon, Caleb insisted she see the doctor. Dr. Morgan examined her thoroughly in his office while Caleb waited anxiously outside. When he finally announced his diagnosis, Virginia stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The doctor in Denver said doctors can be wrong," Dr. Morgan said kindly. "It's rare but not unheard of. Despite what you were told, Mrs. Landry, you are most definitely with child." "About 3 months along, I'd estimate." Tears streamed down Virginia's face as the impossible truth sank in. A child, her child, Caleb's child. When she emerged from the examination room, Caleb took one look at her tear-streaked face and pulled her into his arms. "Virginia, what's wrong?" "What did the doctor say?" Virginia looked up at him, joy bursting through her tears. "I'm pregnant, Caleb. We're going to have a baby." The wonder that spread across his face was something Virginia knew she would remember for the rest of her life. "A baby." He repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "But I thought we thought, so did I." Virginia laughed through her tears. "It seems the doctor in Denver was wrong, or perhaps it's a miracle. Either way, we're going to be parents." Caleb whooped with joy, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a gentle circle before remembering her condition and carefully setting her down. "A baby," he repeated, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." The news spread quickly through Willow Creek. Virginia's students were delighted, especially Emma, who immediately began planning how she would help care for her new cousin. The ranch hands offered gruff congratulations to Caleb while secretly planning to build a cradle as a surprise gift. Most surprising was the reaction from the mother's circle. The day after the news became public, Virginia found a basket on the schoolhouse steps filled with baby clothes, a handmade quilt, and a card signed by every member of the circle. That afternoon, Mrs. Hollister approached Virginia as school let out. Mrs. Landry, she began, looking uncharacteristically humble. The Mother's Circle will be meeting this Friday to begin planning the summer festival. We would be honored if you would join us. Virginia regarded the older woman thoughtfully. As a guest, Mrs. Hollister shook her head. As a member, if you're willing. Virginia thought of all the pain this group had caused her, the exclusion, the whispers. But she also thought of the basket, of the tentative efforts at reconciliation over the past months. Of the community she was helping to build. I would be delighted, she said finally. Though I must say I've been part of mothering this town for years, long before this little one. She rested a hand on her stomach. A woman's worth isn't measured solely by the children she bears. Mrs. Hollister nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. Perhaps we all are. As Virginia's pregnancy progressed, she reluctantly reduced her teaching schedule, finally stepping back entirely for the last month before the baby was due. By then, the school board had hired a promising young teacher from Boston, whom Virginia carefully mentored before handing over her beloved classroom. The baby arrived on a perfect September morning, a healthy, robust daughter with Caleb's whiskey-colored eyes and a dusting of Virginia's auburn hair. They named her Hope Elizabeth Landry, a name that embodied everything the child represented to them. She's perfect, Caleb whispered, cradling his daughter with awe as Virginia watched from their bed, exhausted but radiant, just like her mother. Virginia reached out to touch the tiny hand that had escaped the blanket. I never thought I'd experience this moment, never dared to hope. Caleb sat carefully beside her, arranging baby Hope so they could both gaze at her sleeping face. You've been proving people wrong since the day I met you, Virginia Landry, showing them that there are many ways to measure a life well lived. Virginia leaned against his shoulder, overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. I'm glad you saw me, she said softly. Truly saw me when others looked right through. You were impossible not to see, Caleb replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You've always been the heart of this town, now you're the heart of our family too. Baby Hope's arrival transformed life at the Landry Ranch. Virginia embraced motherhood with the same dedication she had brought to teaching, while Caleb proved to be an adoring, hands-on father who thought nothing of walking the floor with a fussy infant while Virginia rested. Emma and Thomas were enchanted with their little cousin, visiting whenever possible to help care for her. Even Mrs. Winters, the stoic housekeeper, melted at the sight of the baby, crocheting tiny booties and singing old lullabies as she rocked Hope to sleep. That Christmas, Virginia attended the Mother's Circle holiday meeting with Hope nestled in her arms. The women cooed over the baby, passed her around carefully, and included Virginia in their conversations without the awkwardness that had once characterized their interactions. She's beautiful, Virginia, Mrs. Peterson said, smiling as Hope gripped her finger. And you're a natural mother. Thank you, Virginia replied, though I like to think I've been mothering in my own way for years. Mrs. Hollister, overhearing the comment, nodded thoughtfully. You have indeed. We were too narrow-minded to see it. Virginia smiled, bouncing Hope gently as she began to fuss. The wonderful thing about communities, about families, is that they can grow and change, learn new ways of seeing. By the time Hope celebrated her first birthday, Virginia had been fully integrated into the life of Willow Creek in ways she had never imagined possible. She served on the school board, offering guidance to the new teacher. She hosted reading circles for women at the ranch, sharing books and ideas. And yes, she attended the Mother's Circle meetings, often with Hope on her lap, contributing her unique perspective to the group's discussions. On a golden autumn evening, 5 years after their wedding, Virginia and Caleb sat on their porch swing, watching Hope play with her 3-year-old brother William in the yard. Emma, now 13 and staying with them while her mother visited relatives, supervised the children's game. Did you ever imagine this? Virginia asked, leaning against Caleb's shoulder. That night at the spring festival when you told me I was the heart of this town, Caleb's arm tightened around her shoulders. I hoped for it, dreamed of it. But no, I couldn't have imagined how full our lives would become. Virginia watched as Hope laughed, her auburn curls catching the late afternoon sunlight. Remember what you said about legacy not being just about blood, about it being what you leave in people's hearts. Caleb nodded, his eyes soft as he gazed at their children. I meant it then, and I mean it now. I was thinking, Virginia said, about starting a proper library in town. The children need books, and so do the adults. We could convert the old storeroom behind the schoolhouse. The school board is supportive, Caleb chuckled. Always planning, always teaching, always finding ways to nurture this community. Is that a yes? Virginia asked with a smile. It's an of course, Caleb replied, kissing her softly. Whatever you set your mind to, Virginia Landry, you accomplish. It's one of the countless reasons I love you. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Virginia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a lonely schoolteacher excluded from the mother's circle to a woman surrounded by love, a husband who saw her true worth, children who filled her days with joy, and a community that had finally embraced her for exactly who she was. She hadn't needed to change to fit their definition of womanhood. Instead, through love and persistence, she had expanded their understanding of what it meant to be the heart of a family, the heart of a community. And in doing so, Virginia Landry had found her truest self not defined by what she lacked, but by the abundance of love she had to give.